Hey Simon, it's Derek. It's been a while, but I've been out on a business trip, and I recently saw a great video on your channel showing a logical solution to this particular puzzle, which was really cool to see. So this is a puzzle that had previously appeared on your channel. Mark got a little bit stuck and had been forced to resort to bifurcation in order to proceed with it. I also gave this puzzle a go, and I was able to solve it in a sort of reasonable manner. But my approach to it was very, very different from the one that was highlighted in your video. And so I thought you might be interested in seeing the logic that I used to solve this. So there were two main pieces of logic I used. And for the first one, I would like to call your attention to these four squares. Now this is almost an x-wing, so I think we can all agree that if this 8, 9 were here, we would have a simple x-wing. Now an x-wing on 9s. But that's not the case. In this case, the sort of one of the ends of the x-wing is broken. The pair that would normally form the x-wing are disjointed from each other and can't see each other. And when that happens, there's still useful logic that you can do, but it's kind of the inverse of what you normally do with an x-wing. And what I mean by that is normally the number that you would be interested in with an x-wing would be the shared number, so it would be the 9s in this case. But actually with this sort of inverted x-wing, the number that's interesting is the complementary number. So in this case, that is the 8 that is part of the broken pair that you have down here. And so the way this works is there's two possibilities, right? Either this square is an 8 or this is not an 8. So let's look at the possibility of if it's not an 8. If it's not an 8, then it's a 9. That means that this is a 1, this is a 9, and this is an 8. The other possibility is that this is an 8. It's either an 8 or it's not an 8. So either this is an 8 or this is an 8. And this is always the case with this sort of broken x-wing, which I'm gonna call an inverted x-wing. This is always the case. And so what that means is any cell that can see both this square and this square, we can eliminate the 8s from. And that's both of these two squares here. So the online solvers will find this particular logic. They will call it an XY chain if it finds them. But this particular construction where you have this kind of broken X-wing is very, very common. And it's pretty easy to spot if you know what you're looking for. So I don't really classify it with the broader group of XY chains the way the solvers do. A lot of those other chains that it comes up with are really hard to spot or hard to follow. This one is not. Okay, so the next strategy that I'm going to show you is a common strategy that I use for solving puzzles like this. And it is a little bit slow and a little bit clunky, but it is also very reliable, and it's a very good way to make progress on very hard puzzles when you don't have any better way and you don't just want to sort of guess and bifurcate. And so there's a couple prerequisites to being able to use the strategy. The first is you need the puzzle to be about half solved. This puzzle is even a little bit more than halfway solved, and so it's really perfect for using this particular strategy. But you want there to be lots of pairs and triples in the grid. You want there to be, some places, sure, where there's 4 or 5 candidates in a cell, but you also want there to be lots of places where there's only 2 or 3 candidates in individual cells. And so this puzzle is set up quite well for this particular strategy. What you want to do is you want to pick a 3x3 area, and here we're going to use the one in the middle, where there are still lots of places that numbers can go. And it's the numbers that have very unrestricted options that you're the most interested in. So here in this central area, there are 7 places a 9 can go. What that means is that 9 is actually the most interesting number for us for applying the strategy. The next most interesting number here are actually 8s, because there are 5 different places in here where the 8s can go. You'll notice that there's only 2 spots for a 1, 2 spots for a 5, 2 spots for a 3, 2 spots for a 2. Those numbers are very uninteresting for us for this particular purpose. The next best number in this particular 3x3 area are 6s, of which there are 3. But that's not particularly advantageous to us for reasons I'll explain later. The other thing that you want is you want to select a cell that has, if you can, exactly 3 candidates. It will work if you have 4 or 5 candidates, but it gets harder and harder to follow. So 3 candidates is just about the perfect balance of complexity in my experience and ability to follow it using standard color notation. What I'm about to show you, I call a candidate forcing chain. I believe it to be a subset of cell forcing chains, but it's actually, the eliminations I'm going to show you don't actually appear most of the time in computer solvers. If you ask a computer solver to take a crack at this with a cell forcing chain, it will not come up with this particular set of eliminations. Maybe it's finding other ones first and then they become unnecessary, I'm not sure, but it's unusual to see this line of logic duplicated in a computer solver. Anyways, I'm going to start with the assumption that what I'm going to be looking for is where are all the possible places that a 9 can go. That's what I'm going to be trying to mark. And I'm particularly interested in this kind of central area here. So a 9, if we start with the assumption, what if the cell is a 9, then obviously a 9 can go here. And now we're actually done. We can stop at this point because the information that we really want is where can a 9 go in the central area, and we've already got it. With this assumption, this is the only place a 9 can go. I'm going to go ahead and mark the other 9s real quick. Let's see, this is an 8, this is a 9, this is a 1, this is a 9, this is a 5, this is a 9. And I'm just doing that because I want to demonstrate how this technique works in a broader sense rather than only showing this kind of shortcut version of it. So now we're going to keep marking positions where 9s can go, but we're going to change our assumption. We finished with the assumption, what if the cell is a 9? We're now going to ask, what if the cell is a 6? Where can a 9 go? And we're going to follow the chain until we find out in the central area where a 9 can possibly go. So here, and I'm going to color these 9s a different color. So if this is a 6, then this is a 9, and I'm going to color it blue. And if this is a 9, then this is a 5, and this is a 9. And so here we have two different chains that are pointing to the same cell and saying that that cell needs to be the same number. And so when that happens, when there's overlap like that, I'm going to color the cell purple like this. Now, if this particular cell is a 6, then this is a 9. We just covered that. This is a 6. This is an 8. This is a 1. That means this is a 1, and that means this is a 9. So that chain was pretty long, but as you probably saw, it wasn't actually hard to follow. That's one of the benefits of doing it this way. That also means that this is an 8 and this is a 9. And now we've eliminated 9s from this column and from this column. So we're in the blue line of logic, marking blue 9s. There's already a blue 9 here and a blue 9 here. There's also a blue 9 over here. So that eliminates all of these squares and leaves only this as the remaining possibility for a blue 9. And so we've achieved our goal. We've found where a 9 can go in the central area. Now, the last possibility is, what if this square is an 8? Well, if this square is an 8, then a 9 can go here. And now at this point, we can stop. We've gotten all the information we needed. We have identified the 3 possible places that a 9 can go in the center. And it makes sense, right? There's 3 chains, 3 assumptions that you can start this square with, a 6, an 8, or a 9. Each of those assumptions is going to lead to one place inside of this central area that there can be a 9, ideally one place. And so once you find all 3 of those are also the 3 only places that a 9 can go. So now we can eliminate 9s from all of the remaining places. And actually, if there were more places that 9s could go on the outside, you can also do similar logic to the remaining 9s in any of the outside 3x3 areas. But those are all mostly taken up. Also, if you wind up with a situation where all 3 chains point to there being a 9 in this cell, for example, then that means there has to be a 9 in that cell. But anyways, this is what I did when I was going through the puzzle. I eliminated those 4 9s. And again, I kind of shortcut it because if this is a 9, then boom, you have this one. And if this is an 8, then boom, you have this one. So the only chain you actually have to follow to do this is following the 6 and see what happens when it's a 6. But already this central area is looking a little bit less intimidating. So 9s were the most interesting number, and we've greatly reduced the number of places they can go already. Now 8s are the most interesting number. So I'm going to switch over to 8s and do the exact same analysis using 8s. So if this is an 8, then this is a 1, this is an 8, this is a 6, this is an 8. Now, if this is an 8, then this is a 9, this is a 1, this is a 9, this is an 8. Now we also have, we've eliminated this column from being a green 8, this column from being a green 8, and that means a green 8 can only go here in this top 3 by 3. Now, something else I noticed when I first went through this is chains, you don't have to follow the chain in exactly this direction. You can also follow it in another direction if it's available, and I do recommend checking them if you get the chance. And so in this particular case, you could also work the logic like this. If this is an 8, then this is a 1, this is an 8, and the fact that this here is a 1, that means that this has to be a 1. This is a 1, then this is a 9, and if this is a 9, then this is a 1. And so you may recall in our last line where we did this, we actually determined that this was a 9. That's how we got that this was an 8. But the chain going in the other direction says that this is a 1. It can't be both of those things, and so there's actually a contradiction here that will let us eliminate this 8. That's a little hard to see, and if you can't spot that right away without practice with this method, that's totally fine. You can just keep using this method to sort of keep eliminating down the numbers, and I'm going to keep showing you how to do that. But the fact that there's a contradiction here means this 8 can be eliminated, so remember that. We're now going to follow the same process that I used on the 9s, and we're going to say, where can the 8s go if this is a 6? So if this is a 6, then this is a 9, this is a 6, and this is an 8. And if this is an 8, then this is a 1, and this is an 8. And if this is a 1, then this is a 1, and this is a 9, and this is an 8, for example. So if this is a 6, I mentioned you can often follow chains in multiple directions. That's also the case here. If this is a 6, then this is a 9. If this is a 9, then this is a 5. This is a 9, and this is an 8. And now we have a blue 8 here, and we have a blue 8 here, and that leaves only this square as a remaining possibility for a blue 8. Now, the last question is, where can the 8s go in the central area if this box is a 9? And the answer should be pretty clear that it's here in this box. So we previously had this marked as blue, so I'm now going to color it purple to show that there's been a collision there. And now we've found all the possible places where an 8 can go in this central box. That means that we can eliminate this 8, and this 8. But you may recall, I also found a contradiction that eliminates this 8. That means that there's only one place left for an 8. This has to be an 8. And that cracks the whole puzzle completely open. It means that this has to be a 6, this has to be an 8, this has to be a 1, this has to be an 8, this has to be a 1, this has to be a 9, a 1, and so on and so forth. This is an 8, this is a 9, and just the whole puzzle completely collapses from this point forward. 5, 9. And so hopefully you enjoyed seeing that. It's a little bit of a different approach. It's not as fast as the bent triple that was spotted with link being linked by the 6-8. It takes more steps and is more complicated than that. But the truth is, I never saw that bent triple. And I think this is a useful way to make slow and steady progress towards the completion of a puzzle. So that was it. That was what I had to share. I hope you found it interesting. I hope it was useful to you. And I look forward to continuing to correspond with you more in the future about these things. And let's just check it. Looks good to me.